Hi everyone, it's Jennifer from Fiberflux. In this video, I will show you how to make a chunky arm knit cowl. This is a really fast and easy project. And for this project, you'll need 2 skeins of bulky yarn, a pair of scissors, and of course your arms. And for this cowl, I used Lion Brand's Wool Ease Thick and Quick. This is the eggplant colorway, this thicker one here. I also used a strand of Lion Brand's tweed stripes, and I held both of them together throughout. For this tutorial, we'll use Lion Brand's homespun and Lion Brand's tweed stripes. So we'll move this out of the way a little. So to begin, if you're a knitter, this will seem pretty familiar. It's just like the long tail cast on, but if you've never knit, that's fine. And we'll measure out our yarn. So I like to hold it just like this and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, just to estimate. And next we'll make a slip knot. If you have never arm knit before, I would encourage you to watch the Fiberflux video called Basics of Arm Knitting. It's available on the Fiberflux YouTube channel. And in the video, we make a practice swatch. So if you'd like to practice a little bit before you start, that's a good video to begin. But if you're ready to just jump right in, we'll keep going. So to make a slip knot, wrap the yarn around your fingers like that to make a loop. Like that. Now bring the yarn around the back so it'll look like a circle with a line through it. Next, you're going to reach down and pull that up so you have a loop, just like that. And then you're going to slip it onto your wrist, just like a bracelet. And then you'll want to tighten it just a little bit, not too much. So when you're finished doing that, you'll have 2 strands hanging down. This strand here is our tail, and it's a little bit long, and it has an end. The other strand, it's called the working yarn, and it's called that because it's attached to our yarn balls here, and that's the yarn that we'll be working into the project or feeding into it. So to begin, this counts as our first stitch already. So to begin, we'll take our 2 strands, and you take your index finger and your thumb, and you're going to come in, see how they're hanging down sort of in a triangle. You're going to come in between them like that, and then take your other, I usually use my ring and my pinky and clamp them down at the bottom. So you make kind of a diamond shape, just like that. And let me move these strands so you can see it much more clearly. There you go. Okay, so we have our diamond shape. Next we're going to come down, and with our index finger, we're going to go under our thumb and under our index finger and pull that loop up. Put it on our wrist and tighten it just a little bit, not too tight or too loose. You want this to be loose enough to be able to work under, but you don't want it to be so tight that you can't lift it or it's squeezing your wrist. Definitely don't want that. So that's our second stitch. So we're going to do the same thing. Come in the bottom like that. Hold it. We have a diamond shape. Then we're going to come down, go under our thumb, under our index finger. Bring up a loop, put it on your wrist. That's 3. We're going to be casting on 12 all together. So that's 3. Under, that's 4. Five, 6, 7, 8, and this uses yarn, lots of yarn, very, very quickly. So I'll be pulling lots of yarn in this tutorial. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine. So now we have 9 stitches. So 10, 11, and 12. So here we have our 12 stitches cast on. And to begin the first row, you're going to take the working yarn. Remember, the working yarn is attached to the yarn balls. And I like to keep the tail far, far away so we don't accidentally knit it into our stitch. So take the working yarn, and what you're going to do is tuck it into the first loop. Just like that. Bring up the loop and put that loop on your wrist. Just like that. And then drop the loop from your right wrist. Then we'll do the same thing. Tuck the yarn into the next loop. Bring up a loop. Put it on your wrist like a bracelet. And drop the loop off of your wrist. Just like that. And we'll get a little bit more yarn here. And then we're just going to keep doing that all the way across until we reach the end. So tuck it into the next loop, bring up a loop, put the loop on your wrist, and let this one drop off. Tuck the loop in, bring the loop up, put it on your wrist, and let that loop drop off. And you can kind of hold the working yarn to kind of tighten things up and give it some good tension. Just like when you're knitting or crocheting, you want to have good tension throughout your project. Let's work the next stitch. Tuck it in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist. See, I'm giving it a little tug as I go along, and then drop that loop off. So you can just kind of straighten everything out like that. Okay, we have a few more stitches left. Bring up a loop, put on your wrist, this one drop off. You can see our row is starting to grow very quickly. Tuck that loop in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, drop that loop off on that side. We'll get a little more yarn off our yarn ball. Tuck that loop in, bring up that loop, put it on your wrist, drop this loop off. Okay, a few more stitches. Tuck it in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, drop it off. 3 more to go. Bring up a loop, just like that. Bring up a loop, drop it off. Tuck it in there, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, and let it drop off. So that completes the first row of our chunky arm knit cowl, and as you can see, row 1 grows very, very quickly. So row 2 was worked the same exact way, but we're going to be passing it, the stitches from this arm to this arm. And it's done the same exact way, but I'm going to show you because when you're knitting, you flip the work over to keep going. But you can't do that with your arms. But the good news is you can just pass it from side to side and it's the same thing. So we're going to do the same thing with the working yarn. We're going to tuck it into the first loop, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist. Just like that. Let that loop drop off. It's going to feel very loose and almost tangly in a way, but it'll be fine. Just keep going and everything will kind of straighten out as you go. Take the working yarn, tuck it into the next stitch, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, let this loop drop off. The working yarn, tuck it into the next stitch, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, let that one drop off. We'll just do the row the same exact way, all the way across. Tuck it in there, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, let that loop drop off. Let's get some more yarn here. Tuck it in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist. This one can drop off. Tuck the yarn in, bring up a loop, let this one drop off. Tuck in a loop, bring it up, let it drop off. Tuck the yarn in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, let this side drop off. Tuck in the yarn, bring up a loop, let this side drop off, and we have 2 stitches left. Tuck the yarn in, bring up a loop, let this side drop off, and last stitch, tuck the yarn in, bring up a loop, and let it drop off. So now we have row 2 complete, and you can see just how quickly everything is growing. Just like that. Okay? So to finish your cowl, you're going to keep going till you have a total of 10 rows. So we have 12 stitches wide and 10 rows long. So here's the original cowl, and I'll just move my arm over a little bit here. This is the original cowl, and I deliberately did not seam it or weave in the ends or anything, so we can do that part together and I can show you. But as you can see, it's very loopy. And it's almost, when you're finished, will be just about a square. So it's very wide, but very short and snug around your neck. So let's learn how to bind off, and then we'll weave the ends in and seam it. Okay? So to bind off, you're going to do it the same exact way. You're going to take your working yarn, tuck it into the first stitch, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, let that loop drop off. Tuck the yarn in, bring up a loop, put it on your wrist, and let it drop off. Now here is where it's a little bit different than a regular row. Instead of going on with the rest of the stitches, we're just going to do 2. Then we're going to take this loop here that's closest to your elbow and lift it up and over your hand so that you have 1 left. And that's how you bind off a stitch. Next, we're going to knit the next stitch, just as we normally have been doing. Let that loop drop off. 2 loops on our wrist. Lift it up and over and off of your hand. Just like that. So to finish, we're just going to keep doing this all the way across until there's no more stitches left on this side. So lift it up and over and off your hand. And pull some more yarn out here. Okay. Do the next stitch, just like that. Lift that loop up and over and off of your hand. Tuck the next stitch in, bring up the loop, let it drop off. 2 loops on your wrist, lift it up and over and off. Tuck the next loop in, bring up a loop, let that side fall off. 2 loops on our wrist, lift it up and over and off. So we only have a few left, so we'll just go through and finish those. Just like that. up and over and off. At the next stitch. And if you're a knitter, this is almost exactly like doing a basic bind off, except for you would use your needles to do all this, of course. Okay, and then we have the last stitch on this side. Just going to knit it just as we normally did. Let that drop off this side. And now your right arm is free again. And you can just lift this up and over, and then you'll have just one stitch left on your wrist. So to finish, you'll just take your scissors and snip. Then you'll take this leftover piece. Now I cut mine pretty short. I would recommend, this is just our practice piece, but I would recommend leaving it a little bit longer. You can use this end to seam it, or if you did cut it too short, you can use your tail to seam it. Either end you can use. But what you're going to do is take this piece and draw it through that last loop on your wrist and pull it snug. So then you'll be left with your piece, and like I said, to make the cowl is 10 rows. We just did 2 rows to show you, but this bottom here, when you're finished, this is where we cast onto our wrist. You'll want to kind of pull it open. It'll be scrunched up. So you can see our example here. Obviously that's too short, so let's move on to the finished cowl, and we'll get a yarn out of the way. Now to seam this up and weave in the ends and all of that fun stuff, let me just open this up for you. So we cast on 12 stitches, and I'm trying to fit it all in here, but we cast on 12 stitches to start, and then we worked 10 rows, and this makes almost a perfect square. And because we cast on so many stitches, it makes it, when you squeeze it all together like this, it makes it very thick, hence the name Chunky Arm Knit Cowl. But it's going to make a nice thick cowl like that, very squishy. And then we'll seam it like that to make the cowl. So let me show you how to do that. It's very simple. You don't need any fancy tools, and you can do it with your hands. So we're going to make it, so when you look at arm knitting, when you see these ridges like this, these are like purl rows, just like in your knitting. When you flip it over, these are the knit stitches. This is considered the right side of your work. And if you flip it, the purl ridges are considered the wrong side of your work. So let's flip it to the wrong side of the work and fold it so that the ends meet like that. And then you're going to line up. Sometimes it's hard to see because it's lots and lots and lots of loops. But you're going to line everything up, and then you're going to take one of your working tails here at the end, and you're just going to kind of sandwich everything together. And I have made a little loop here just so I could keep the end. I didn't finish off just to show you, but you make your knot like that, just like that. So let me just trim that piece off, and then you can just have that little end, you can just weave that in. But I left one side very long from your tail when I started. So we're just going to sandwich these pieces together, and then we're going to seam them up. So just take your end, and you can kind of like reach in there and feel the stitches. And we're just going to kind of do a whip stitch with our hands. All a whip stitch is you're just making a spiral around the stitches with the yarn. So just kind of sew in these edges, just like this. And again, we have the wrong side facing out. So we're going to seam it up, and then we're going to stitch it up. I'm sorry, we're going to seam it up, and then we're going to weave in the ends, and then we're going to flip it back out. So I'm just going through and doing this very quickly. You want to spend a little more time on this to make sure everything's nice and neat. Finish work is so important to your piece. When you've spent a lot of time working on a piece, you want to make sure your finish work is nice and neat so that it really shows off the piece and all the beautiful work and all the stitches that you took time to do. So we're just working a quick whip stitch all the way through here with our hands. And I mentioned in another video, arm knitting is so much fun because you really have the opportunity to set down your hook and set down your needles and all your tools and really just use your hands to get in the middle of all those stitches. So we've come to the end, and I had just enough yarn here, and you can just kind of fasten it off, just knot it a little bit, and then take the I'm actually going to put another knot just to make sure it's nice and secure. A nice little knot in there. Then you'll take your ends and then you'll just weave them in, just as you would normally do with a tapestry needle when you're using for a crochet or knitting project. And then you can come back and do another pass just to make sure everything's nice and tucked in. And then you can take your scissors and just snip that off. So we have this all seamed up. And then you can come in through here like this and kind of find the opening there and then flip it out. Look at that. I'm just trying to get everything all straightened out here to show you. And that is your chunky arm knit cowl. And it's very lofty and thick, and it really shows off the yarn in a really pretty way. And that's it. That's the chunky arm knit cowl tutorial. And I wanted to also mention, when you are working this pattern, you can work longer, make it longer by working more rows. This is meant to be nice and snug up against your neck and very, very thick. So that's our chunky arm knit cowl tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the red subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again!